So let me talk about where we are as a country in the United States right now. In March of 2020, the stock market started crashing. Everyone was losing their minds, fear was through the roof, so the people who run our country decided to print lots of money and send it to people so they would spend money. Because when people spend money, the stock market goes up. So we all got our relief checks and we ordered stuff on Amazon and we bought a new iPhone from Apple and we started investing on Robinhood and Webull and all these other investing apps, and the stock market rebounded and they were like, good. And they dropped interest rates to 0 so people would borrow money and increase their debt because that would help the economy, that would stimulate the stock market. We're borrowing, so Bank of America stock is going up, bank stocks are going up, we're borrowing from lenders. So they did these things. I don't know how much they care about us individually, but they did these things primarily to prop up the stock market. Dropping interest rates and printing money props up the stock market. Unfortunately, what it also causes is massive inflation. As the stock market rebounded for the next 2 years, inflation rate climbed and climbed and climbed because we increased the monetary supply by about 20%. We printed 20% more money. 20% to 25% of the dollars that exist today were printed in the last 4 years. You increase the monetary supply that much, inflation is bound to follow. So as inflation rose, the Federal Reserve started to get nervous about it and they started to raise interest rates. And they raised interest rates about 0.75% every quarter. So every quarter, Jerome Powell would show up at the meeting and everyone, all investors would be watching and waiting, holding their breath, and he'd say, we're gonna hike interest rates 0.75%. So as he hiked interest rates, we got to a point, November 2021 is when the stock market peaked, about 1.5 years after the initial crash in March of 2020. So in November 2021, the stock market peaked. That was around when serious tightening began happening. Serious tightening. That's when we started getting past 3% interest rates to 4, 5, 6, 7. Now we're at 8% interest rates. It's the fastest rate hike that has ever occurred in the United States history, from 0% to 8% in 3 years. It's fast, really fast. So now we're back at the point where the stock market is starting to plateau and even crash again. And because these three things are related, inflation, economy, and stock market. You print money and you drop interest rates, the stock market rises. You tighten interest rates, the stock market goes down, but you bring down inflation. So one thing to consider with seriously high interest rates, so high you couldn't even consider buying a house. Because at an 8% interest rate, you're going to be paying almost 50% more monthly payment wise than you would with a 0% interest rate. It doesn't sound like much, 0% to 8%, you're like, oh. It's the difference between a $2,000 monthly payment on a house and a $3,000 monthly payment on a house, if you look at it. So what is going to happen next is if the stock market falls enough, if people stop spending money enough, if the economy shrinks enough, if jobs reports are down enough, the Federal Reserve will have to lower interest rates. They won't have a choice, especially coming up on an election year. They want to look good. They want jobs to be strong. They want the economy to look strong. They want people spending money. They want the stock market to look good. They want to have a good track record. You know, they'll have to drop interest rates now that they've tamed inflation. So that's how those three things are related, and that's where we're at now. We're at an 8% interest rate, but inflation has come down to 3%, and the stock market is starting to fall significantly to the point where I think that during the next calendar year, 2024, they'll have to bring interest rates down now that they believe they've tamed inflation to a certain extent. And that's how it affects you. Personally, I'm considering purchasing a house, but I don't want to do it at an 8% interest rate. You can always refinance. I could get a better interest rate later. That's true, but I believe that during the next year, interest rates will have to come down. And with geopolitical turmoil, supply chain issues, all the rest, it's pretty likely the stock market will continue to come down, in which case lower interest rates will follow.